Hello, I'm Tara Ruckman.
And I'm Stephanie Howe, and we are Control the Chaos EDU. Are you burnout? Are you feeling frustrated or overwhelmed?
Or maybe it's the opposite, and you're a go-getter and want to level up. Then it's time to dive in with real talk and solution-focused conversations. Hey everyone, here we are in June in our guest month. We have lots of amazing guests, and this week is no less than phenomenal guest, Miss Lynsey Comer. She is a great friend of mine and an amazing educator. She happened to marry me. That's how much I like her. I let her marry me for the second time around because she's so good. She is going to be here talking about tips or advice in transitioning to a new role in education. Hey, Lynsey, how you doing today? How about you tell us a little about yourself?
All right. Well, thank you so much for letting me be on. Feels kind of weird, but I'm excited because I do listen every week. I listen when I'm driving home in the morning from working out. So I appreciate that you thought to ask me on. What can I tell you about myself? Well, I have done like every single position that you can do in the school building. I moved over from England halfway through my undergrad, so it wasn't completed. So then when I got here, nothing really transferred over. My original plan was to go to school to be a gym teacher. But then when I got here, I got a position as a parapro in an MD classroom, and I knew like zero about what that even meant. So within the first week, you can imagine I was pretty shell shocked, but knew that like I just fell in love with it and I wanted to go back to school. So I did that for 4 years, almost 5 years, when I was going back to school, knocking out some kids at the same time. But I just found a love for special education, like accidentally. And then I've kind of, from there, just continued to go. And here I am today.
So you started as a parapro, and then you went to a teacher, then you went to a special education coordinator, and coordinator. Woo! It's June. It's summer. You can tell, right? Coordinator. And now you're heading into a vice principal role. That's exciting. And it seems like your feet are always moving. You never stop. So this is that time of year where we do have a lot of movement within schools. Oh, yeah. So how can you give us some tips today on what your experience has been like transitioning from new role to new role to new role, always keeping your feet moving and climbing the ladder in education?
Yeah, so I guess I likely have undiagnosed ADHD. Let's just put it that way. I don't like to sit still. I love to learn. And it's funny because when I was in high school and the right age to go to college, I did not enjoy learning at all. I think I just discovered it when, one, I had to pay for it myself. And two, I had children at home that were, needing a lot of my attention while I needed to put attention into education. So I just discovered that I really enjoyed learning when I was an adult. So, I found this job as a parapro. I learned so much from it, but I had some like really phenomenal mentors at the time. I learned, how to differentiate what that even meant. My own personal experience going to school, there was not a lot of students in classrooms that had noticeable disabilities, I'll say that. Most students in England went to different schools. They weren't included in the public system like we were. So as a parapro, I just learned a lot from those mentors, differentiation, how to manage behaviors, and how to advocate to get those students out into the inclusion setting. So I think the skills and the things that I learned in that position were like the stepping stone for me to become an intervention specialist, right? Then I got to dig a little bit deeper when I had my license in my own classroom. Again, I've always been blessed with having like great mentors that kind of showed me one, how to be a good leader in a classroom, how to take initiative and kind of run with it. So as an intervention specialist, my biggest thing then was building relationships in the building and again pushing out students for that inclusion model. Um, but one of the biggest things, because I had already been a parapro, when I was an intervention specialist, was making sure that the parapros that I worked with, we all had like equal value in the classroom. We all had like equal roles. We were all as important as one another. Um, so that kind of set me up then to move into the coordinator position. I went back for that love of learning and got my educational administration license. And again, fantastic mentors and role models in the building principals that I worked with. And I learned a lot about special education from like the admin perspective. But there's no way I could have done that without being a parapro and without being an intervention specialist. I just got a different scope of what special education looked like in this position. And then now I'm going to transition into an assistant principal role, which I always said I did not want to be a principal. I figured I would be a better building principal if I knew more about special education. I would be able to reach those struggling students that weren't identified. I could reach those students that are general education students with a better scope and a better knowledge, and then obviously the special education population. So I just felt it was time to, go from one position to the next position. The timing was just always perfect. So here I am now, about to dig a little bit deeper into education and also be able to get back into the classroom and be around students and teachers more. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I love your story. And I know you have a lot of different viewpoints when you're meeting with probably parents, teachers, maybe even working with different students. Do you think having all of those different parapro, teaching, and all of those different experiences helped you become a better educator?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like going back to that first week as a parapro, again, I had never been around students with multiple disabilities in one place. So that was really eye-opening for me. But then the people that I worked with and how, like, seeing how much they loved what they did, um, definitely led me to be a better intervention specialist. And then the relationships that I had kind of built and the skills that I had learned as an intervention specialist, I feel led me to be a better special education coordinator. Um, so yeah, I do think it's important, to reflect, do a lot of self-reflection and keep a hold of those things that made it possible for you to do those jobs so that you can just kind of build on them for the next position.
You mentioned relationships quite a bit throughout that conversation. You talked about your relationships with your parapros and your relationships as you transition to the coordinator position. Can you give us some ways that you worked at creating those relationships as you transitioned from position to position? Because that's always an important piece. We hear that all the time now, so much about relationships. What are some of the ways that you tips that you could give to some of our listeners about how you have built those relationships as you transitioned?
Yeah, relationships is huge for me. I want to always consider myself like a people person. I want to be approachable and I want people to feel safe talking to me and asking questions and kind of challenging me as well when maybe they don't think what I'm saying is correct. So I think for me, like relationships is I want to say it's one of my strongest things. I like to have positive relationships with everybody, and I don't enjoy confrontation at all. So if I can have a positive base with somebody when something does get hard or people do have questions, like I know I always have that stronger base to kind of fall back on to build that trust with people. But I do think it also takes a lot of self reflection. When somebody does question you or challenge you, or maybe not understand my point of view or my reasoning, then for me to self reflect and be okay with that. Like, I can't always be right. Well, at home, I can always be right. But like in my job, I need to do a little bit of self reflection. but yeah, it is the most important to me, is having those positive relationships with people that I work with, collaborate with. Parents in this position as a special education coordinator, obviously it's a lot of parent communication and stakeholder engagement. So again, being open and being flexible to their suggestions has been a must, really.
So at the end of the year, we have a lot of teachers changing positions, changing roles, sometimes voluntold, sometimes required, sometimes it's their choice. But a lot of feelings, a lot of emotion comes with those changes and transitions.
Mhm.
And since you've kind of experienced that, what are maybe some tips or suggestions you would give to somebody who might be having some of those changes coming next school year? And it might have not been their decision, or it might be their decision.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, luckily I've never been voluntold. Like, it's always been on my own choice to find these new positions. But I think it's important not to be stagnant. Continue to use the experiences you have, and whether you have taken this next step voluntarily or involuntarily, like, know that you have amazing experiences behind you to just kind of build on them to move forward. Um, I think it's also really important to always be open to learning, because, we don't want to get stagnant. I found a really good quote as well that I wanted to say. Henry Ford had said, anyone who keeps learning stays young. And let's be honest, I mean, there's no amount of Botox or exercising that can keep the aging off me. So I need something other. So I think learning has got to be it. Just always strive to use what you know and build upon that.
You're right. Botox doesn't keep you young.
Doesn't it doesn't.
I tried it once, and it didn't suit the purpose that I needed. I was looking for. So back to learning I go.
Yeah, you better start learning, pick up a book. I think that's important too. Like in the positions that I've had, and I've said this a lot in this last year, in the last couple of years when I've been a coordinator. When we hire new people that come right out of college, people say they're green. And I always say, you don't learn from a textbook. And I know as teachers, that's kind of like, uh-oh, what's she saying? But you learn from experiences. So you don't learn how to be a special ed teacher in your, you know, Psych 100 class or your ABA class. Like, you learn it when you're in the moment, hands on, thinking on the fly. And I think that's important in any position, whether you've been voluntold or you volunteered to do the new position. There's opportunities to always learn and keep growing yourself. So don't worry if you haven't read the textbook on how to do it. You'll figure it out.
That's awesome. I mean, you have so much experience. The one thing I like that you said earlier, and I'm going backwards a little bit because I need to get caught up, but you mentioned treating your parapros as equals, making sure that everybody felt value in the room. And then when you became a coordinator, I know that you did the same thing. Even in your administration role, you made your teachers and your parapros all feel valuable, and leave each of your meetings or your staff meetings or your parent meetings as valuable. Can you give us some of the ways that you would say you have made the effort and gone above and beyond to make everybody feel like they have a value and a place in your classroom or in your buildings that you've been a coordinator of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just stripping down titles and roles, right? It doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter what your title or your role is. At the end of the day, we all bleed the same color. So, and I think as special ed teachers, especially our special ed teachers that work in our, highest needs classrooms, our MD classrooms, they couldn't do that without those parapros in there. The same way that a coordinator could not have a functional building without, great intervention specialists or related service staff. So again, going back to that relationship thing is, stripping all those names and titles away and just treating everybody as an equal member of, this the small community in the classroom, the larger community in the building. Everybody's role is and should be as functional as the next. So, um, I always, you referred to my coordinator meetings. I always invited support staff to those meetings, um, because I kind of wanted to model that we are all one team. Like, it's not he said, she said, or hey, well, Comer said this in our meeting today. Like, I want everybody to hear it as one united group. Now, let me say this: they didn't always come to the meetings, but they're always invited. And if they were in attendance to the meeting, I would always make a point to make it meaningful for them and not necessarily just information that they're listening to that doesn't impact their day. But yeah, they didn't always come. They were always invited, though.
So heading into your vice principal role, making people feel valued just like you did in your classroom and your coordinator role. What are your plans, your future plans for doing that as you move into administration?
Yeah, I'm excited because the position that I step into, one of the buildings is one of the current buildings that I have. So I do have relationships with most staff members in that building, all special ed, most gen ed teachers. But then the other building is a brand new building to me. I know a few people in the building, but just kind of on the surface level. So again, relationship building being the biggest for me, that's going to be my first plan, right? Is to go in and to kind of take away those roles and responsibilities and get to know people. I'm excited for this position to get back into the classroom, to support teachers, to support like the social emotional needs of kids better than I have been able to. As a coordinator, that kind of takes up a lot of parent meetings, IEPs, ETRs, behavior plan meetings. That kind of sucks your time away from being accessible to the classroom. So I am really excited to do that, and be more visible in the buildings.
Yeah, and what is something that you're really looking forward to in this new position?
Knowing faces and names and being able to put the two together, because I can spew off, like right now my caseload is about 340 and I know all these names, right? But if I saw them in the hallway, I've got like a 60% shot of getting the name and the face right. So I'm really excited to put names and faces together and kind of you know, know the kids.
All right, so we talked about lots of some tips and suggestions and great ways to kind of transition to a new role in education. What about challenges? Any roadblocks that you could talk about, that things as you've seen that have come up where you're like, I had to work through a problem or problem solve in the moment, that you could share, that maybe as somebody else is transitioning from role to role, maybe that could help them overcome the roadblock before they even get there?
Yeah, I mean, I know the last 2 years has been really hard in education, and every single one of us have been asked to do a lot of things that we necessarily weren't used to doing or um, thought we were able to do. But I think when we focus so much on the things that we're being asked to do, we kind of negate the fact that we have so many resources available to us, especially in Pickerington. I mean, we have coaches, we have people in the building that are willing to help out. We have some great staff at district office that are willing to, pass down information. So I think when you get to a roadblock, don't try and recreate the wheel. Don't try and take all these things on yourself and reach out to the people around you to ask for help. And I feel like the pot calling the kettle black at this point, because that has been one of the hardest things for me, is asking for help. Um, I like to just make sure it's done and get it done myself. And it might take me hours to get it done, but I've gotten better myself asking for help and delegating tasks. But as somebody that's like in the classroom with limited time, I think it is important when you come across a roadblock to ask for support, because we do have lots of people around us to help us. It's just finding them and knowing that they're willing to do that for us.
Yeah, and I think that was hard my first year. Was Pickerington does have a lot of support, and being that first year teacher, you wanna think that you have all the answers in your textbook.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have all
help.
the experience, so you gotta
Mhm.
be able to get past that and ask for help,
Yeah.
because connecting and networking is so important, especially in education.
Yeah. And I will be the first one to say, Stephanie, that when I was in the classroom and you would send out your newsletters, like that was something that I took time to like actually look at, especially when we started getting into like more technology, because your background, like, and you and I never really worked together close enough, but I was like, oh, Stephanie Howell's newsletter came out. Hold on a second. Like, look at this thing that I could use. And I still do. And it's not even like a lot of the things that come out or you put out in your newsletter, like I couldn't really use in the position I was just in, but it's just cool information, right? And so you're sharing out with people that not necessarily can use the things, but now going back into my next position, I'm like, I remember this time when Stephanie was able to like shoot out a newsletter and personalize it for each. Like, I remember that when she gave those tips on how to personalize it for each student. I'm like, I could use that in my next position, So use your resources, man. It's important.
Yes, and thank you so much to our listeners for listening. We appreciate everybody that listens. Lynsey, how can people connect with you outside of the podcast?
I guess you can reach me at my email address, which which I don't know. Do you guys put them out anywhere? Do you put them on your website?
Yeah, we can put them in our show notes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so if you have questions, feel free to email Lynsey. If you're like, okay, I just got a new position and I don't know how I feel about this, or if you have any maybe special education questions, she has lived the life of the parapro, the teacher, and the coordinator, and now the assistant principal. So she is such a great resource if you do have any questions. Also, we hope that if you heard something in this episode that you share it on social media. So feel free to tag us and give it a like, and also leave us some reviews. We would love to see what you think and get some feedback from our audience. And until next time, control the chaos. Thanks for listening to Control the Chaos EDU. Check out the description for show notes.
We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Subscribe to the weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. Control the chaos. Until next time.